Hey guys, my name is Chelsea Seaburn. Welcome to The Smart Student. If you're here right now, I'm assuming it's because you need help writing literature reviews, that or your professor is holding you hostage making you watch this. Regardless, be sure to download this free template I created about writing literature reviews. And with that, we're going to talk about how to convert an annotated bibliography into your literature review, specifically in this video. Let's get started. Okay. So to start, let's discuss what these two assignments are, starting with the literature review. And now this is simply a synthesis and a critical analysis of the current literature review or information that's available on a specific topic or even a research question. And when performed correctly, a literature review, it's going to give you a full picture, a clear understanding of what is currently known about that topic, which is going to help you identify any gaps in the research, any common themes, any arguments or popular debates, which in turn is going to help you contextualize your own research. On the other hand, an annotated bibliography, well, let's break this down. To annotate means to add notes, and a bibliography is a reference list. And so it is quite literally adding notes to a reference list. So two completely different assignments. Let's talk about how they're related. And to do this, I want you to think about blocks, building blocks. So the purpose of building blocks is, well, to build. Let's say we want to build a tower. To do this, we're probably going to sort and organize our blocks first. We're going to find the ones that are the strongest. We're going to set a plan. And then when it comes to building the tower, it should be as simple as placing the blocks where they belong to build that nice, strong tower. The thing is, the relationship between an annotated bibliography and a literature review mirror the exact same relationship blocks have to that finished tower. In this case, the annotated bibliography is going to be those individual blocks, and the completed tower will be your literature review. Because a literature review is built from the annotations, aka blocks, in an annotated bibliography. So that makes our annotated bibliography the starting point. And now, just as a strong tower needs strong blocks, let's talk about how we can maximize each annotation. I like to teach students that each annotation should contain three things. First, it should contain a summary, then an evaluation, and finally, its relevance. And so starting with the summary, this is where you want to give a brief overview of the material from that source that's relevant to your research. Next, you want to evaluate the source, and I mean in terms of its credibility, the quality of the research, the scope of the study, or even any biases or limitations that are present on behalf of the researcher. And then finally, you want to end with a small section of how this source is relevant to your research. So in other words, how does it contribute to your bigger picture? If you include these three components for each annotation, it's going to make your life so much easier later on. Matter of fact, let's read through one of these annotations so you can see how they relate to each other. Okay, here we are. Let's say that our overarching research topic is social media addiction among teenagers. In other words, we're researching a problem, probably with the hopes of introducing some type of solution. Okay, here's our annotated bibliography. Let's start by reading the first annotation. We have Johnson and Williams explore the paradoxical nature of social media, explaining that while it can foster connections, it can also lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness. The article presents data from a survey of 1,000 participants found through social media platforms aged 13 to 20. The results of the study concluded that social media increases feelings of connection among teenagers. However, this type of connection is superficial, thus contributing to a higher percentage of loneliness. The article is based on original research performed by verified academic authors. It offers valuable insights into the psychological effects of social media. However, the study size is the study sample size is relatively small considering the type of research performed. This source provides a unique angle on the topic by considering both sides of social media. It will be useful for discussing the complexities and contradictions inherent in social media's impact on mental health. So, as you can see, our annotation starts with a summary, and do take note that this accounts for most of our annotation because this is the material that we're going to be using in our literature review later on if we decide to use this source. But then we have our evaluation, and this is showing us the scope of the research, and this one did have some limitations in that we found the study size to be relatively small. So just things to keep in mind when you're piecing it into your literature review later on. And then the relevance section, what this basically does is it serves as a reminder to you of why you're using this source in the first place. In this case, we're using it because it provides that unique angle in that it considers both the good and the bad of social media, which we're going to be discussing in our paper. And that leads me into the second important part of writing an annotated bibliography, which is what I like to call labeling your blocks. And basically, this means that when you write an annotation, you should ask yourself, what purpose does it serve towards your literature review? So for example, we know we're researching a problem with the hopes of introducing a solution. So our blocks might be broken down into, let's say, these three categories. One, it'll help describe the problem. Two, it might provide an example of the problem or even evidence to support the problem. And finally, it might provide a solution, so a potential option to fixing our problem. Now, looking at the annotation we just read, well, I'm going to say that this is going to be labeled as the problem. If anything, this is going to be the beginning of our literature review because we're introducing our reader to the negative impact of social media, starting with the good, but also saying, hey, there's some bad here with social media when it comes to mental health in adolescents, because then we can build on that and we can start to shape our literature review towards the addiction point of view. Now let's take a look at the other annotations we have here, and I'm not going to read through all of them word for word. You're welcome to check out this video if you want the full tutorial on writing this annotated bibliography. Instead, let's just pull out the highlights so we can label our blocks, okay? In our second annotation, this is discussing a study that involved 700 high school students, and basically they were measuring their screen time and correlating it with addictive behaviors, such as withdrawal symptoms, loss of interest in activities, and emotional distress when unable to access their social media. So this would be evidence for our problem because this is specifically researching the addictive nature of social media. Next, let's see what we have here. Well, right from the start, it says Patel created a pilot program called Digital Detox aimed at reducing social media addiction among teenagers. So I don't have to read anymore to know that I'm going to label this as a solution because obviously this research was performed as a solution to helping teenagers with social media addiction. Now we have one more. Let's see what we have here. So as I can see, this is another study where the researcher used a sample of high school students, and they were also researching the addictive behaviors of social media, except this where it's a little different is that they found a negative association between excessive social media use, engagement, and the academic success among adolescents. So here, I'm going to label this as more evidence, but this is just another study studying a different scope of the problem, and that now we're talking about how it is affecting their academic success, so their grades and such. So our annotations are labeled. Now we're ready to write our literature review. And do note, you'll have a lot more than 4 annotations, but we have enough to work with, so here we go. Okay, when it comes to writing your literature review, you're going to be structuring it one of 2 ways. One, it's going to be a standalone assignment, meaning it's the only thing you've been assigned to write. Or 2, it's going to be part of a larger project, usually a research paper. If it is part of a research paper, you're going to include your literature review directly after your introduction because think of it as the last piece of information your reader needs before you start introducing your own research. For our example, we're going to write a standalone literature review, and so we want to treat this like any other writing assignment, in that we're going to start with a title page. We're going to have a main body that includes an introduction and a conclusion, and then we're probably going to use section headings to signify the distinct different sections throughout our literature review. So here's our finished product. Let's talk about how we use the annotations to build it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is discuss a logical order in which we're going to use our blocks to build our literature review. And now we kind of already went over this, but basically we know that we're going to start by outlining our problem, because then we'll be able to provide the evidence that supports the problem, in which we'll have the full foundation to suggest the solutions that we found. And so as you can see, our section headings reflect that. The first section heading, this is always going to be a copy and paste of your title page, which is Social Media Addiction Among Adolescents, a Literature Review. But more so going into where we're going to be placing our annotations, we have the paradox of social media to start. I found that as a phrase coming from our problem annotation. I like where it said the paradoxical nature of social media, so I think that's a great heading to introduce our problem. Then we move on to social media addiction. This is where we're going to provide the annotations that outline the evidence of the social media addiction. And then finally, we have social media detox. And so that's going to be reflecting the solution annotation from our annotated bibliography. And then just as if this were a standard academic assignment, we have our conclusion to round out the paper. But now that our outline is ready to go, that means we're ready to start placing our annotations where they belong. And so a couple of notes to making this process more efficient. What you're essentially doing is you're using the summary portions from each annotation, and you're flushing them out into an academic verbal style. So this means you're adding transitional language. You're making the sentences more fluid, not so stiff as if they were just notes in your annotation. You're making them flow within your paper. On top of that, we're going to be adding what's called linking language, because essentially you're going to be linking the information of each annotation to the author that wrote it. And don't worry if that doesn't make total sense, because we're going to go through the full tutorial in just a second. But the final note before we begin is that I recommend writing your introduction and your conclusion after your entire literature review is complete. So with that in mind, that means we're filling in the paradox of social media first, okay? To understand the paradox of social media, Johnson and Williams argue that while regular use can foster connections, it can also lead to an increase of loneliness. To test this theory, Johnson and Williams conducted a study that targeted 1,000 diverse participants aged 13 to 20 who were found through various social media platforms. The survey was used to explore their social media habits and perceived impact on their emotional well-being. The results of the study showed that many respondents agreed that social media had helped them establish and maintain connections with friends and family while providing them with a sense of togetherness. However, Johnson and Williams explain that the paradox lies that in the fact that despite these apparent benefits, a substantial number of teenagers reported experiencing greater feelings of loneliness and isolation. Okay, so there we have it. Let's talk about how we flushed out the annotation and we included that linking language. So flushed out, this is where we're adding transitions, usually to the beginnings of sentences, so that way there is a logical connection between the independent thoughts and ideas. So for example, these are going to be things like, to understand the paradox of social media, to test this theory. We have a few of those within here, again, just to make the paragraph more fluid. Another example of this would be expanding on some of the points so they don't sound so stiff and rigid. An example point would be, the results of the survey concluded that social media increases feelings of connection among teenagers. That's very stiff. So in our paper, we might put something like, the results of the study showed that many respondents agreed that social media had helped them establish and maintain connections with friends and family while providing them with a sense of togetherness. So see how we expanded and added more information while building off the point from our annotation. Next, we have the linking language. And this is my way of saying that you're going to be linking the material in the paper to the source it came from. And so examples of this are going to be things like Johnson and Williams argue, Johnson and Williams conducted, the survey was used to explore, the results of the study showed, Johnson and Williams explained. And so notice how pretty much every sentence uses that linking language, and it's because you want to make it crystal clear that all of this material belongs to this source. None of it is your own material because, again, the purpose of a literature review is to research literature that's already out there. None of it is your own material. But essentially, that's the process that we're going to repeat for the rest of the annotations. And note how easy that was. So moving on to the social media addiction section heading, now we're ready to provide the evidence. So let's go ahead and read through this section. To start, we have: with the increasing rates of mental health complications among teenagers, Martinez and Thompson set out to explore the addictive potential of social media. To do this, they developed a study that involved 700 high school students with the intention of measuring their screen time and correlating it with indicators of addictive behavior such as the loss of interest in other activities and emotional distress when unable to access the platforms. The results of the study reported that, on average, teenagers spend 5 hours per day on various platforms, with approximately 67% disclosing feelings of anxiety or irritability when limited access to their accounts. A similar percentage indicated a loss of interest in offline activities such as hobby sports and other academic pursuits. So again, as you can see, we have flushed out the points by using the transitional language, and we have used our linking language. Things like Martinez and Thompson set out to explore. To do this, they developed a study that involved, the results of the study reported. So with that, we're finished with the first evidence annotation, and we feel like this is a good point to add in the second evidence annotation because pay attention to the last sentence. It says a similar percentage indicated a loss of interest in offline activities such as hobbies, sports, and other academic pursuits. Now would be a good time to talk about the second annotation that discusses how social media addiction impacted their academic success. And so what we go on to say is, to further this point, Wang conducted a 2-year study that indicated that adolescents struggling with social media addiction not only experienced a loss of interest in daily activities, they often suffered poor academic performance. Through his case study, Wang found a direct correlation between the severity of addictive behaviors and the rate in which a student's grade declines. It was reported that students who use social media a minimum of 4 hours daily experience significant drops in their grade point average over time, with some students' GPA dropping into a failing range as their screen time increased. So note how these two sections complement each other in the order that we've included them in our literature review. And this is a small point, but this paragraph here, you could break this up into 2 paragraphs, or you can include it as 1 paragraph like I did here. I just wanted to show you an example of what it might look like when you're combining 2 different annotations within 1 section. But with our evidence section complete, now we're ready to move on to the solution section, which we're calling social media detox. So let's go ahead and read through this, and it's kind of a longer one, so stick with me here. But we have: as social media addiction becomes more prevalent in society, it's imperative that effective treatment plans are readily available. In the article, Digital Detox, a program to combat social media addiction in teenagers, Patel presents a potential solution called Digital Detox. The study followed 300 teenagers aged 14 to 18 over a 6-month period in which they were instructed to abstain from social media platforms. To help cope with limited social media usage, the program implemented a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy, mindful techniques, and the participation in non-digital activities. The digital detox also encouraged an increase in parental involvement in each teenager's life, including help with managing stress and developing coping skills while undergoing the program. After the 6-month program concluded, Patel conducted a detailed statistical analysis that compared pre- and post-detox assessments, evaluating the changes in digital dependence and general well-being. Patel's findings indicated that there was an overwhelmingly positive impact on its participants' mental health, including a 45% reduction in reported stress and approximate 20% decrease in anxiety and depression levels. Aside from well-being benefits, teenagers who participated in the digital detox reported feelings of renewed interest in daily activities, with over 70% indicating increased engagement in hobbies, sports, and academic pursuits. While Patel's program proved successful during the 6-month period, it does not offer conclusive evidence for long-term results. Likewise, it does not address the impracticality of fully removing social media from its participants' lifestyles, rather than finding a healthy balance with the platforms. Okay, let's go ahead and unpack why we have what we have here. In the first paragraph, we're basically outlining the study that was performed, while in the second paragraph, we're including the results of the study. Now, the additional information and why this is so much longer is because we've included the limitations of the study. Since this is the solution to our problem, it was important that we include that it's not an absolute solution, because in this case, the study that was performed was only 6 months long, so it doesn't address long-term results, and it doesn't address how impractical it is or would be for a teenager to completely remove social media from their life. So there are some limitations that we wanted to make sure we include here. But aside from that, it's the same process that we have been going through, and that we're using our transitional language between sentences to link our thoughts together. And we have our linking language. In this case, we're referring to Digital Detox, the program, Patel, the author, the study, and so on and so forth. But with our building blocks in place, the only thing we have left to do is write our introduction and our conclusion. So coming back to the top of our paper, we're going to write our introduction, which you want to approach just as a standard introduction for any academic assignment, in that you want to introduce your topic, include any relevant background information, and then write some form of a thesis statement. So what we have here is: in today's digital age, social media has become an integral part of teenagers' lives, enabling them to connect, share, and interact with a global audience. On the other hand, extensive social media use is increasing as a topic of concern for developing mental illnesses, some of which are closely associated with addiction. The following literature review will delve into the paradoxical nature of social media contributing to the rise in social media addiction among adolescents, as well as explore any potential solutions available to help combat those struggling with dependence to the platforms. So as you can see, in the first 2 sentences, we're introducing our topic. We're providing some extra information. We don't necessarily need background information here. But then our third sentence is where we're including what I would consider our thesis statement, because we're outlining the purpose of our paper, what we're going to be researching, and what we hope to achieve. Now that we have our introduction set, we can move on down to our conclusion. And likewise, you want to approach this as if this were a conclusion for a traditional academic paper. So what I recommend starting with is either a restatement of your thesis statement or some form of bringing your audience back to the topic of your paper, just to bring them back to the purpose. And then what you're going to do is provide brief summaries for the main points discussed throughout your paper, and then end with a concluding statement where you're going to give your final impressions of the research. With that in mind, we have: this literature review sheds light on the multifaceted nature of social media's impact on teenagers' mental health. The paradox of social media, as highlighted by Johnson and Williams, underscores the complexity of its influence. Furthermore, Martinez and Thompson's study illuminates the addictive behaviors associated with social media use among teenagers, revealing a loss of interest in non-digital activities and emotional distress when unable to access social media. To build on this point, Wang's study draws a direct connection between an adolescent's amount of screen time and their falling GPA levels. In response to the challenges posed by social media addiction, Patel's innovative digital detox program offers a potential solution, although it is limited in its findings. Due to the nuances of social media addiction, this literature review highlights the need for ongoing research and intervention efforts to address the complex relationship between teenagers and social media. All right, so as you can see, our first sentence brings the reader back to our topic. All the middle sentences highlight the main points discussed by each different source, and then we conclude with our lasting impression, which is basically stating that we need to do more research to fully understand or provide a solution to this problem. But with that, we have officially built a structurally sound, effective literature review from our annotated bibliography. If you have any questions on this, let me know. Do like this video, subscribe for more, and don't forget to download the free template of literature reviews, which should be available on your screen up here. And I will see you guys in the next video.